Welcome to WiredToHunt's Whitetail How-Tos, where we provide a step-by-step tutorial for one important deer hunting task.
Today I'm going to talk about some of the off-season scouting mistakes that I see a lot of people make, and I've made them in my life too. So I try to pay attention to them. So if I go out in late winter or early spring, I don't do the things that aren't going to benefit me. I'm not talking about summertime glassing or running trail cameras here. I'm talking about this late winter, early spring window that we would typically call winter scouting. One of the biggest mistakes that a lot of people make is they stick to the same routes and they go to the same spots. Instead of going out to scout to learn what you don't know, you go out to confirm what you do know. This is probably most common if you have a private place to hunt. So you take the same routes through the woods, you look at the spots that you really like to hunt and you go, man, I love having a stand here and there's a bunch of rubs here. My job is done. I've winter scouted. I've confirmed my biases, right? What you want to do is you want to go to the places that you're not familiar with or the places you don't hunt. I've had this driven home so many different times on properties I've had permission to hunt for years and years. And I say, I'm going to take a walk. I'm going to look around. And I force myself to look at satellite imagery of those properties so I can go target areas that I don't typically hunt, and they're not the places that I like. I do this on private ground. I do this on public land a lot too, just to get outside my comfort zone a little bit and try to learn something. And what I see a lot of people do is turn these walks into a shed hunt, and they want to go the same places they always go. It's great if you want to go shed hunting, but if you actually want to learn what you're missing, you've got to go figure out how those deer are reacting to the other hunters and how they're reacting to you. And one of the things that you notice the most if you start doing this is you'll start finding concentrations of rubs and scrapes in different places where you're like, why is that buck there? Why were these bucks using this spot? Sometimes it's in response to other hunters, but sometimes it's in response to us. I hunt a lot of small properties around my house, and I always think there can't be anything I'm missing on 20 acres or 30 acres. I feel like I should know everything, but every year I see deer do stuff that I don't expect. And every spring, I walk through those properties and I find little patches of cover, little spots with this sort of condensed deer sign, and I go, that's probably because of me. And I need to remember that next year if the place I really like to hunt starts to go dry. Well, how are those deer reacting to me? And it's not necessarily that the big bucks are always going, well, that dude sits there, so I'm gonna walk through there. It's the overall pressure that's being put on the deer. And so you might have a group of does, they were bedding in a place that was pretty consistent, but you went in there 5 or 6 times and they go, that's too much for me. They back off to that swamp edge or they go into that patch of willows. And we think, well, no big deal. I wasn't going to shoot them anyway. Well, most hunters want those does around and they want them on a consistent pattern. You don't want to educate any deer if you can help it. Those deer leave all kinds of clues out there in the woods for you to look at and decide, how am I going to use this for next season? Everybody knows if you head out in early April that you're going to want to look for rubs and scrapes and trails and all that fun buck sign. And all of that's good, but I treat it a little bit different. I'm the kind of hunter who loves terrain. I love this off-season scouting because the woods are bare and I can see how the ground really is laid out. I'd rather find a place where I'm like, this is where deer have to walk. And when there's no leaves and everything's wide open, you can see those spots better than you will any other time of the season. And then if you find a spot like that where you're like, this looks like the kind of funnel I could hunt all season, or the kind of funnel pinch point bottleneck I want to show up at November 7th and sit for that big buck, you can find those spots and go, all right, what's the buck concentration here now? And what's the buck concentration leading up to it, and the buck concentration leaving? And you can start to tie all that stuff together. A lot of people put a trail camera out on a soybean field in the summer. And it's like, okay, well, you knew the deer were gonna go there and eat soybeans already. So maybe you're taking inventory and that's a good reason, but otherwise, you might not be learning that much there. The same thing happens when you go out and you're off-season scouting and you're looking at the places you already kind of understand. Vary those routes. Go into those little patches of cover that you don't typically go into. Pay attention to that sign, but really pay attention into how it ties into the terrain, because that's going to tell you, where did those bucks come from? Where did they stage? Where are they going to? And how do they like to walk through this stuff? When you start to figure that out in the off season, you can build a real plan for where you're going to ambush them by the time September or October rolls around. If you want more whitetail hunting advice, please listen to the Wired to Hunt podcast and the Wired to Hunt Foundation's podcast, and we'll give you everything you needed to hear about deer.